You are listening to the Let Me Overthink About It podcast, where I dive into a series of topics that occupy my anxious mind. I'm Sam Madore, overthinker extraordinaire. This week, I'm overthinking about death, dying, and grief with Stacey Harrison. Stacey is the executive director of the Colchester East Hants Hospice Society. Here is our chat. I am here with Stacey Harrison. Hey, Stacey.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I'm so excited. I think I've been thinking about asking you for a couple of years, maybe flirting with the idea. And I don't know that you were super keen on it before, but now I just threw it at you. So I'm happy to have this chat with you.
Spontaneous works.
Right?
So, yeah.
I love it. And we're recording this. This is one of my favorite buildings in Truro. It's in the hospice office in downtown Truro. And it's just this old, beautiful home.
Mm.
And what's unique about this building, Stacey, because you are the executive director of the Hospice Society here, but what's unique about it is it's not a traditional hospice in terms of like in-home service, correct?
No. So our space is a 100% office.
Mm-hmm.
We have our memorial garden out front. We incorporate a lot of elements that you may see at a hospice residence, but very much just office only. And it kind of complements the palliative care program at the hospital and really trying to bring in an environment that's very comforting and welcoming for folks that are obviously dealing with death and dying. So,
yeah. And I really wanted to overthink with you because, and we've talked about this before, about how much stigma is associated with talking about death and dying, which I just, as a concept, it's hard to understand because we all deal with it. We all have to face it at some point. Why do you think there is such reluctance to talk about death and dying? I'm going to really just start off on that foot and just throw us right into the conversation.
So I've learned an amazing amount from the social work team because social work is not my background, as you well know. But a lot of the things I think even in presentations, I say how amazing Truro is and the wonderful not-for-profits around and organizations, but we're one of the few that people don't want to talk about. And there's a few others, obviously, but I think it's just, unless you're in it, you may not have a true appreciation for where somebody's at.
Yeah.
There's a fear of, am I going to say something incorrect that's going to cause more hurt and part of the grieving process? So I think that's what our main goal is. Let's make it as welcoming, as normal of a process as we can. Obviously, there's lots of complexities around that, but for the most part, just have a normal conversation and talk about death and dying. And I think that's the biggest challenge, to be honest, is people don't. And until you have that, individual experience, you don't truly appreciate that each is individual.
Well, that's the thing. And I think until you experience it firsthand, you don't really understand even how important it is to have these conversations. Like, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse a little bit. Like, you're just like, I just wish people could learn before they had to learn that it was okay to have those conversations. Like, I was thinking about, before we had this chat, I was thinking about your mom passed away a few years ago. And of course I was, compassionate, and I'm so sorry, and all of the things that you're supposed to say, or you feel like I'm using air quotes, that you're supposed to say. But then when my mom died 4 years ago, I apologized to you because I was thinking I didn't know how to deal with that at the time because I didn't know the gravity of it. So I think it's almost like you wish you could learn that before you were thrown into it, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And obviously we've chatted about this before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I found is I had a friend that it happened to probably about 1.5 years before mom died.
Mm-hmm.
And you really don't know until you're in it. And I remember the advice that she had given me at the time was, you don't know till you're in it. And when you're in it, just make sure that you're there for the next person. And it works.
Yeah. And I think that's a big lesson.
Yeah.
And it's silly to probably apologize, but I think you and I are both similar in that way. Like, you go back and be like, oh my God. But seriously, like, I had no idea just exactly, I guess, how lonely that would feel, to be in that place and to just really not have the words to really describe how that feels. And so going back to, and also, yes, being that person for other people in your life moving forward who have had similar loss is just so important.
But I think that's the other thing is oftentimes you don't need to say anything. It's just providing them a space that they know they can feel the feels. Just say what they want to say, and that's ultimately the environment that I think we all want to create in our professional lives and in our personal lives. Is just have that opportunity that you can just be you.
Right.
And either share, or sometimes it's nothing at all, and you're just offering just a timeout from, dealing with real life. And there's family dynamics. There's work things that are going on that sometimes makes it more difficult to just ultimately grieve. So sometimes it's saying nothing at all.
Oh, 100%. Or saying, I don't know what to say, right? Like actually vocalizing those words is better than not saying anything, or sometimes not reaching out at all, right? Yeah, it's so interesting. I've often wondered too, and you said you don't have a social work background. How do you, like, I've often wondered how people in roles like this, and roles where you're dealing and talking about, like, you're going to the palliative care unit at the hospital, or, obviously there's folks who work in the palliative care unit every day, or you're talking to folks who are grieving all the time. How do you separate yourself from that? Like, how do you not just kind of take that home with you, or maybe you do. I guess every day is probably different.
That's a really good question. I think a lot of it is the team, no question, because 2 out of the 5 of us are social work background and have been doing this. And ultimately the training is in ways to set boundaries and deal with the moment. The rest of us, not so much.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty diverse, skill set beyond that. So I think one of the things that our team has done specifically is create that community, I guess. So you do know each other well enough to know that when someone comes in, it is not a great day. Just offering the space, we do a lot of debriefs. We've got a beautiful common space there that, you can just come together and work through some of the stuff. Because I think for all of us, I never want my team to go home feeling any of it. Yeah. So I think if you create the environment that they feel safe sharing, we jokingly say these walls absorb everything.
Oh.
And I think that's important because it is heavy at times. And, quite often partners and family may not understand. And again, there's that, strict confidentiality piece that you can't share some of that. So if you can have discussions, leave it here and go home and, recharge, whatever works for you, I think is huge. And we all work really hard at creating that. And I think that's healthy. Always room for improvement, don't get me wrong, but I think that it works for us right now. And I think we've worked hard to reach that. And we try to extend that to our volunteers. We do, debriefs with the volunteers so that they have that opportunity to come in and do the same thing.
Right. Yeah. I just think back to, and I don't remember when this was, it must have been, I can't remember if it was during COVID or not. I did like a single week of like volunteering at the front desk or at the reception desk here. And I was exhausted, like just emotionally exhausted. The work is hard. Like when you get those calls or you get the drop-ins and you have those, you want to be present for the conversations of the folks who are coming in who want to share, how they're feeling. And there were a couple of folks who did during that time. And I just thought, I was so grateful to be able to have those conversations with them, but it took a lot out of me.
And I think that's the difference because we do see the opposite side.
Right.
You see people come in and you sincerely know that they're here, they're vulnerable, and it's an honor. There's no question. So they've gifted you that.
Yeah.
You see when they leave, they say, you know what, I feel lighter. Or, the kids' camps, you see them out playing and they're able to talk freely about whoever they, the person in their life that died. And I think that is the motivator. So that's kind of the complement to, to dealing with it internally. There's terrible cases, but if you can see the silver linings, it just keeps it balanced.
Yeah.
And I think we all have created, and others are pretty quick to remind too, like, you've had a really hard week. Like, what are you doing for the weekend?
Right.
Or encouraging, some days that it has been terrible and start the weekend early. Yeah. Right. We've got your back. We'll cover you off. And I think that's just the mutual respect of the team.
Oh,
too.
it's so good. Yeah, talking it out is such a huge thing. And also, I think, like you're saying, the reminder of the community of people who are supporting the organization, but also supporting the individuals too. Like, for those who are watching on, I'm just going to show one of these. So, those who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. These are some beautiful lap gowns that were all handmade for the Hospice Society. And how many did you guys have donated by?
Over 80.
Yeah.
So we put the call out. We had an abundance for COVID. And then when the volunteer program went back last spring, it was crazy. The number of people that we were able to gift them to, obviously, and our inventory ran a little bit low. So we put a call out to the community. And within really about a month and a half, we had over 80 that are amazing.
And there's support for folks who are in palliative care, who need that extra bit of warmth, and they're all handmade.
They are.
By volunteers. Like, and that piece of that we were talking about this before we started recording, where it's like, it's probably either somebody who has been impacted by hospice in some capacity. Either they've been part of the palliative care, or they lost somebody in palliative care, or they're somehow connected through volunteering, whatever, who have felt that impact and want to give back to hospice. Or it's also sometimes patients who make them as well.
And not only that, but even it's been families, right? So they've been impacted. But there's a lot of, crafters groups that just believe in the organization. So, they've gifted, and they may or may not have had a connection.
Right.
We've tried really hard, especially the last campaign, to really invite people to share, a little bit of the story and why. And people have been pretty, not only generous and amazing, but their stories, again, it just goes to that, makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And I keep looking down here because there's a bride.
They're beautiful. And just that is the reminder that you need sometimes, right? Is to just look at those things, and tangibly you're seeing the impact that it has. Yeah. And the sharing of stories is just another way of helping to kind of break that stigma too, right? Because it's like the more people who are comfortable sharing. One of my favorite events that you guys do, I cut myself off there, but one of my favorite things that you guys do is at Christmas time is a tree lighting. Yeah. And you just happened to do it for the first time outside the year that Mom died. So it was the first, you guys have done this before, but I think it was the first time you had the real tree, and it was 2020 because you were trying to find a different way to do it so that we could accommodate the pandemic. And so now it's my tradition for Mom every year to come and to hang an angel ornament on the tree, and it's outside and cold and everybody's together. It's just such a great tradition for me. It just was perfectly timed.
And it's kind of nice. So the memorial garden has a lot of pretty sentimental plants. And then the day caring. I know you've reached out and said, what can we do to be a little bit creative? And so it's been really interesting to see people when they come to the garden to comment about how much it's grown and how many years it's going to be before we can use that and replace. Yeah. Surprisingly, it's not going to be that far away. So it's kind of nice to tie that all in, that it's, support from another program. It's complementing one of our programs and services. And it has, like, the mall this year, we've really tried to focus on what that looked like, and not in terms of stories, but how many people actually have taken time out to place angels on the tree, because this year was exceptional. There was significantly more. So as a team, we were trying to really figure out why. And that's a difficult thing to do, obviously, but
let's just say it's because of all the great work you're doing.
Right. It is. It just was amazing. And we've added a couple locations. And just tried to, build a little bit of awareness. So it was pretty amazing. It is.
Yeah, for sure. And just to go back on Day of Caring as a fundraiser, or not fundraiser, it's a program through the United Way.
It is.
And just where people from the community get to come in and do work within nonprofits, those things that kind of end up being on the side of the desk of pretty much every nonprofit organization everywhere. It's businesses that, support United Way can then come in and actually see firsthand the work that you guys are doing. And so it was the Rotary Club who came in and planted a tree, which is now part of the Angels Remembered. It's like this whole cycle of awesomeness.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And obviously we added one last year. We added to the Memorial Garden and just the stones and incorporated the time. One of our volunteers, that's kind of her passion project. So
Yeah.
that's really grown and evolved, and it's nice to see. And again, it just builds awareness because a lot of people still think that we've got patients here. And maybe there'll be a time that we will, or at another location. But right now, just kind of getting people past that isn't the case here, because we have the unit at the hospital, and this space is meant for, you know, clients to kind of walk through the grieving process. And we did share space at one point with another not-for-profit, which was amazing. And just inviting people to come in. And obviously we have a hard line of product in the lobby too. And again, that's a whole initiative that we've really tried to be a little bit more welcoming and not as, I don't want to say frightening, but it is for a lot of folks.
Can be scary.
So how do you soften that and build a bit of a brand around that? So that's what we've tried to do.
And the hospice hug, that is just such a nice brand. And it's such a, like you're saying, a hug is something that everybody can relate to and understand. So if you're able to put it in terms of like, come in and get a hug from hospice, it's just like a nice warmer way of saying it, other than, you know, this is a place where we talk about death and dying, for example, right? It's just kind of helping to kind of bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, and that's kind of how the Hug Center evolved, in really trying to bring an identity to, you know, our grief and bereavement programming and services. So, and it was a perfect tie-in. I mean, the Hug story has been with this organization with support of the Shearer family for a long time, and it was important for that to happen, and we have, and it's evolved to the Hug Center, which is pretty amazing.
In the Memorial Garden, you mentioned like the stones. I feel like, was that a thing about during COVID that people started painting on rock? Like it became a real big thing, like a fad, I guess, that people would just paint on rocks, but it's really carried on.
Yeah, a lot of organizations are doing it, which is amazing. Yeah. And we actually use it as an activity with our grief groups. So just to tie it in, and obviously when they're doing it in memorial or in honor of. We just thought it would be a beautiful addition to the garden. So that's kind of why we've carried that on. It can be outside. You're not worried about some of the other things around, you know, weather and that type thing. We do bring them in the winter, but it's amazingly experience to put them outside again in the spring, and we're almost there. So,
well, that's the thing. Like, I feel like, and I was talking to somebody recently about art therapy. I remember I was at the high school recently here in Truro, and I was talking to one of the counselors about how art therapy is really, I feel like it's underrated. It's like, and not that this is therapy per se, like it's not under that umbrella, but it feels a little bit therapeutic that you come in. If I don't want to talk about my grief, I can at least come in and paint a rock, and I'm still kind of part of the conversation, but I don't have to be the center of attention. I don't have to call out my grief specifically, but I'm still doing something creative and taking my mind off of, you know, it kind of bridges that gap and makes people feel a little bit more welcome probably too. Hey.
Yeah. And specifically for kids through the pandemic, there was obviously a lot of additional funding opportunities. So we utilized that, and we did the Hug in the Box. So again, tying in the brand, but doing a bit of a kit that had those elements. There was, you know, crayons, there was paint, and a way of expression. There was an activity book that incorporated, you know, themes of grief in that. And that was an amazing project. And now we're looking to ways to expand that for, you know, different age demographics to include for that reason, because everyone grieves differently. They've got different coping mechanisms like we all do. And creativity is a huge piece of it. So one of our board members, just random conversation, created a coloring sheet for, you know, Shanda, so she could just have and take awesome. That has different hug shapes, you know, mandalas. It can be whatever they want it to be. Certainly not just exclusively for children, but to have it and it's branded. So again, it builds that awareness. So if you don't need us now and you do in the future, you know where we're at and what we're about, which I think is a big piece of it.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I think too, like when I think of my own grief with mom, like I just feel like coloring pages, like during the pandemic, especially because of course I've said this before, but mom died right before the pandemic. So it was just this whole whirlwind of things, like new things. And so doing puzzles and, you know, like coloring pages and things like that were just so, so, so important. So to be able to have something like that to occupy your mind without, you know,
thinking too much.
Easier said than done.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Preaching to the choir of overthinkers. Yeah. So because I know you well, I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask anyway. What are the things that you do? Like when you said, you know, you have to go home and sort of recharge and do like once you've gone through sort of busier day or heavier days.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that you do that help you to recharge?
One is an 80-pound furry chocolate black lab. Who
I was like, where's this going?
Is full of unconditional love. Obviously active. Always. She wants to be, you know, outside and active, and that's a huge piece. I think for when mom died, yoga and meditation became huge. And that's evolved to, you know, taking it a little bit more seriously with teacher training and doing a bit more adventure vacations for myself. I'm one that needs to sometimes get a kickstart outside of my normal environment. So travel's a huge piece of it for me, as you well know. I'll go anywhere, almost any time. So that's a huge piece, and I think. Or even just a combination of all of the above, but I think nature is huge, and just getting out of your own head is the biggest piece of it. And I think dealing with death and dying, and then you're dealing with, you know, the operations of an organization on a not-for-profit is a different beast, because that's not my background. So I think there's a bunch of elements that you need to really figure out what works for you, and once you find it, really focus on that to manage some of the more challenging pieces, for sure.
Oh yeah. Getting out of your own head. Like that's the number one. I mean, that's really the basis of this whole podcast. But it's one of the hardest things when you're in it and in those loops. It's so funny because I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, how in the moment, something that is so important to you is like this big deal, like a mistake you made or something that just didn't go quite the way that you expected it to. And it's such a big deal. And then like the next day, you're just like, it's not even a blip on my radar anymore. Like I spent my whole day fretting about it, worrying about it during, after the fact, whatever. And then like the next day, you're just like, why did I spend so much of my energy focusing on that? It doesn't even matter.
But a key piece I learned a long time ago from a very wise woman basically said, if you wake up in the morning and it's still an issue, that's when you spend your time thinking about it.
Right.
I often think about that. And it just kind of, it does. It puts things in perspective.
It really does. Because you're like, why was I so like concerned and thinking that everybody's like nobody's even paying attention. Like you're the only one who actually cares about this. But you have told me this before, travel is the thing.
It is.
And so like you often will have like a travel in the future, like that's your kind of motivator. Hey, like
it is, yeah.
I know that I have a trip to fill in the blank in 3 months. And that's kind of what keeps you motivated.
Yeah. No question.
Do you have a trip coming up?
Maybe.
Do you?
Stay tuned.
Okay,
I
good. Oh,
I do. There's one. My dad has a bucket list trip that is in the works, so I'll be accompanying him.
Excellent.
And obviously my destination of choice that I wasn't able to go through last fall. Certainly hoping is in my future this year. So we'll see.
And that's so important when you can share that with somebody too. Like when it's, you know, like you said, when you just said your dad's bucket list, like that's just becomes so much more meaningful when it's something that you guys can do together. And so important. Yeah. I'm not a big traveler. Like the last trip we did, we just went to New York. I love it. I love New York. I could go there all the time if I could afford it. And I do love but I just am such a homebody. Like I just love to just do a quick trip and then come home. But usually, if you don't mind sharing, you just did it was like a month-long trip.
That was last year. I did this. I did this one for 2 weeks.
Sorry. Right.
In January. At the same destination. So,
So how do you are you able to just completely disconnect in a trip like that?
Yeah. So a lot of people think I'm a bit nuts. My team might be one of those group of people. I did go to an ashram that's pretty frowns on technology.
Yeah.
You obviously do have access this day and age, but you are able to unplug. And every time I go, it's my place. It's all my favorite things. It's, it's ocean. It's, warmer weather. It's like-minded people, good food. The things I love, yoga and meditation, and that for me works. And like I said, it's not that far away, and you can focus on that. And yeah, not everyone's thing camping in a tent, but it works for me.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not me, for sure. But also, do you feel like when you come back that you actually have, like, you're like, I feel refreshed?
Definitely.
That's amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think if you stay too close to home, you don't get that for a vacation, maybe, unless you're just better at it than I am.
I am not.
Or if one is better at it than we are. Because like if I'm too close to home, it's like I've got to clean my house and I've got to like I'm on my phone, or I'm just doing just everyday things, and I don't feel like it's as much of a break as I might need for my mental health.
I've got an amazing board, no question. And we haven't had a whole lot of turnover. So there's some members of my board that literally said, "Do you have a trip planned?" And it's almost like,
they're like, "It's
you know
time."
me that well. But again, that goes back to the team environment, right? And having people that have your back and recognize, and good reminder.
Yeah. I think, and this sounds really corny, but I think communication is like number one. Like the fact that you can just be open about that with people and have the conversation, be okay with admitting when I need to step back, or all of those things, and being open about it is just so important.
It's not easy though.
It's not.
No, especially with small teams, right? Because anytime you take yourself or somebody else leaves the mix for time out, it's hard because you want to make sure everything's done to the same standard, and we only have 5 on our team, and one is a part-time role. So I think that's the other thing that. But again, on the flip side, there's also a silver lining. Yeah, and you have a kind of a renewed appreciation for everyone's role in it. So
yeah. Quick plug for your upcoming fundraising event.
For sure. May 7th, Tuesday night.
Yes.
7 p.m. at the Marigold. Amazing venue.
Yes.
And You'll Die Laughing, which again, sometimes you do have to use dark humor in this building.
Love it.
Has been a brand that has been with the organization for a while, but we haven't done anything since 2017. So we felt this was a perfect opportunity to do a bit of a relaunch, partner with another not-for-profit. And the stars aligned, and it actually fell on Hospice Palliative Care Week, which is a big deal. So we're really looking forward to that, and kind of bringing people together, a little bit of a lighter theme than traditionally. And I think the bigger thing is it's an opportunity for our board, volunteers, and team to come together too, and be available to answer questions and just do a bit of networking that the pandemic didn't always allow us to do. So,
oh man, 100%.
So it's going to feel really good to get back in that environment for
stand-up comedy. I can't. And of course, Deb Barnhill is one of the comedians, and she was a guest on my podcast. I can't remember what season, but she was a guest, and she was amazing. I mean, she always is.
And she's one of our newest volunteers. She completed our volunteer training last week, so we're pretty excited to really showcase that and support her, and because obviously she's been hugely supportive of us and to volunteer our time. So really looking forward to the event for sure.
Deb, I've talked about this before. Deb was one of the ones who made fun of me for being a quoteaholic on my podcast. She was like, and she'll still send me memes.
So you need to do one for her right now. I know.
Right? She'll send me memes that are like live, laugh, love. And I'm like, it's not that kind of quote, Deb. It's not always that. Do you have a quote? Do you have a favorite quote that you sometimes will pull from, or a mantra or something? I'm putting you on the spot.
I do, but I think one that I remind myself daily is progress, not perfection.
Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah, and it's sometimes
it's a hard one. It's a good one.
Beyond hard, but simple enough that I think it just kind of good reminder.
I love it.
Good reminder.
Thank you so much. This was such a great chat. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks again to my pal Stacey for overthinking with me about a tough topic: death, dying, and grief. And thanks again to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia for supporting this podcast.